the great conservative movement of America and of our time. A brush fire of freedom that's being lit all over this country. We, as an irate, tireless American populace, will overcome the few radical leftists that control the levers of power today. Joe Biden's failed economic policies has given us inflation like you can't believe, and the border is in disarray.
It's amazing how few of the people commenting on this have actually bothered to go see what's happening. Well, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona actually went to the border.
Biggs, where's Andy? Boy, oh boy, Andy. There's a guy. He's tough.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of What's the Big's Idea? It's a regular podcast. I am so excited to have with me my good friend from Colorado, Ken Buck, who's been a friend of mine since I came into Congress and does such an awesome job. He's from Colorado's 4th Congressional District. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and House Foreign Affairs Committee. He is the founder of the Article 1 Caucus and the Reformers Caucus. And he has authored multiple books. His most recent book is called Crushed, Big Tech's War on Free Speech. And ladies and gentlemen, I've had a chance to read Ken's book. It is an awesome book. I can't tell you, Ken, I think you nailed it so much. It was very interesting, well written, well documented. And so we're going to spend some time. I can't promote your book, but we can talk about the issue, which is Big Tech's War on Free Speech. So welcome, Ken. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andy. How'd you come up with the title for your show?
Did you do that? You might have done that. I don't know. I really don't know. That goes back to when we started it. We started my first year in Congress, I think it was. I think we were the first one to have a podcast, and so that was interesting. And we came up with, it was kind of a brainstorm. I know that staff brainstormed about it. So, but it's good to be with you. Good to serve with Ken Buck. He just does a really good job and representing his constituency. He's articulate, measured, and great. Ken, I want to play a clip for you just to kind of set the context of it, because I was dismayed when you read your book, and you and I have talked about this many times, and you've served on the subcommittee dealing with these issues for a long time through the Judiciary Committee. But Matthew, would you please play clip number 1?
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
We have that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have. If something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise.
So Ken, I wanted to play that clip because I thought it was interesting because it shows this kind of collaboration, if you will, between the FBI and social media. And when we look at big tech overreach on Americans, and we see this, it's been a problem for many years. We know that there might be some surveillance, there might be some censorship. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you, my immediate thought is that Mark Zuckerberg can't answer a question. You know, it only required a few sentences to be able to tell the story that he was trying to tell, but he was all over the place with that answer. So, Andy, here's the reality. Law enforcement is going to have a relationship with newspapers and radio stations and TV stations. They don't want child porn to be shown on Google. They don't want terrorists recruited on Facebook. They have a duty to make sure that they are monitoring these news sites so that they can protect the public. Now, obviously, in this case, they went overboard. They tried to impact an election by creating a false narrative about the Hunter Biden laptop. But if you listen to what Mark Zuckerberg said, he said, we do something different than Twitter. We just don't, the ranking is lower. Right. Well, that's nonsense. The ranking is lower because you made the ranking lower, and the ranking is lower not because some FBI agent came to you, because if it was really Russian disinformation, you would have wiped it out completely. You knew that this was going to be damaging to Joe Biden, and so you decided that this story shouldn't be shared with a lot of people.
So it's an interesting thing because you talked about monitoring for illegal conduct, right? So we get that, and then you also talk about whether they're directing thought or whether they're trying to direct a narrative, if you will. How do they distinguish it? Where's the line on that, and where do they go on that?
Well, the line is pretty clear in my mind. One, we know what's illegal. We know what the elements of a crime are, and we know whether someone has committed an act that is worthy of criminal investigation. We also know what the law on free speech is. You can't run into a crowded theater and yell fire. Anything that would present a clear and present danger is something that can't be said. And so these big tech companies, that's the standard that they need to use. And when they decide that they're going to suppress something, they're going to censor something because they disagree with a viewpoint, that goes way outside the boundaries of what we're talking about. A debate over masks or vaccines or other issues like that's healthy debate in a country that has free speech. And there are so many other areas that are healthy, and the Hunter Biden laptop story is just one of them. If what was presented was true, and it turned out to be true, Joe Biden was involved with his son in some nefarious activities before he became president, before he was elected, and that should have been information that the American public received.
Yeah, so there's a whole series of things. I'll just give you a couple. You mentioned several of them. The censorship of differing COVID-19 opinions. So this thing's going on back and forth on that. Conservative commentators. The promotion of the Russian collusion hoax, which turns out to have been interesting. The suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop right before the election. So I guess has Big Tech been colluding with, or is this all on Big Tech, or is there some government activity there that should not have been there? I mean, that's what Zuckerberg is insinuating. He's insinuating, well, we never would have suppressed that, but for the fact that DOJ gave us some rather amorphous statement. I mean, what do you see happening there?
Well, I think that you had a rogue FBI agent that went around telling some of these companies, look out for Russian disinformation, like this laptop story. And then you had these companies using it as an excuse and saying, we're going to make sure that we don't let this blow up. And in the process, it probably got more play than it would have gotten otherwise, maybe, because as soon as you tried to suppress something, everybody thinks, oh, it must be true, or they wouldn't be trying to suppress it. That's what happens a lot with the vaccine issues and the mask issues. But I do think there is collusion between the White House and big tech. I think it's obvious when you look at some of the people who were kicked off of Twitter, suppressed on Facebook, that the White House had a lot to do with that. Elon Musk is revealing that in these Twitter files, and it's helpful for America to get our arms around the real issue here that we've got 4 or 5 companies that have a monopoly on speech and a monopoly in their business marketplace, and that monopoly is really dangerous.
Well, that leads me to an area I wanted to cover with you, and the monopoly situation that we have. Talk about the monopoly of information and speech and the impact that it has on us.
Yeah, so when you have 94% of individuals using Google as their search engine, and Google changes the algorithm in June of 2020 to benefit Joe Biden and to disadvantage Donald Trump, you have a situation where they are impacting the election. You can't count exactly how many votes they impacted, but everybody that Googled Donald Trump got negative stories on page 1, 2, and 3. Everybody that Googled or who Googled Joe Biden got positive stories on page 1, 2, and 3. And that has an impact. And we know there were many other companies that did similar things to try to help Joe Biden. That is, these mega companies are putting their thumb on the scale and helping the Democrat candidate or the candidate of their choice. That goes way beyond a newspaper editorial that endorses somebody.
Yeah, right. Because they're doing, not only are they promoting their favored candidate, they are suppressing the candidate that's out of favor with them. And
well, and not just that, Andy, but they're not advertising this as an editorial. They're not saying use Google because we're supporting Joe Biden. They're saying use Google. It is a neutral platform that is going to give you information about the subject you search. And the newspaper, the news side is supposed to be impartial, but we all know that the editorial side takes positions on issues and candidates.
Yeah, and I won't say that you are, but I'm certainly old enough to remember when I grew up, there were 2 newspapers in Tucson. You knew one leaned toward the pro-Democrat and one leaned pro-Republican. The afternoon paper was pro-Republican, the morning was pro-Democrat, and people bought it because they knew where the editorial slant was for the editorial page, even though the actual news looked really similar. I mean, there were, you could spike something through the editorial process, but otherwise it was going to look really similar, except till you got to the editorial page. So that kind of covers the monopoly of thought and speech and political impact. Let's talk about the economic impact as well, because you've done research on that. Promotion of, let's take a look of suppressing for better terms, non-Amazon products for Amazon favored products. Tell us about that and how that's affected our economy.
Well, let me start with Google, and then I'll go to Amazon if I can, Andy. So there's an encrypted email service called Proton Mail. And Proton Mail, whenever the Proton Mail user sent an email to a Gmail user, it went to the spam folder. Now, Google did that on purpose to frustrate Proton Mail users so that they would stop using Proton Mail and come over to Gmail. And that's the kind of market share that they had, that they were able to do that. If you couldn't send a Gmail and they didn't have such a huge market share, and Proton Mail wasn't so small, people would say, well, I'll just change my Gmail account. But in this case, you had people leaving Proton Mail because of what Google was doing. Now Amazon has a platform, and people search for goods on that platform. So if someone has a widget and they enter into a contract with Amazon, Amazon will sell that widget on the platform. If Amazon sees that widget really selling well, they will go and replicate the widget, and then they will sell the widget on Amazon on page 1, and they will drop their client's product to page 3 of their sales. So they have the monopoly on the platform. They dominate e-commerce, and if they see sales doing well, they just go and replicate the product, and that's a huge profit maker for them. They've been sued in India, they've been sued in other countries, and including the United States, for that very issue.
So you also have done research and the anti-free trade type of situation. They like, I think it was diapers.com or something like that, where they saw here, oh my goodness, here's an up and coming e-commerce business. It looks like it's going to really be successful. What happened with that?
It's really an interesting story. So diapers.com was successful because they had figured out how to lower their costs because they had various warehouses near important markets. Yeah. Then what diapers.com did was say, well, everybody who's buying diapers probably needs baby soap. They probably need these other baby products. So we'll expand from diapers into these other product lines. And at that point, Amazon said, wait a second, they're going to grow and become a competitor. We need to take them out. So they engaged in something called predatory pricing. What they did was they offered moms, and this was, out of the goodness of our heart, we're going to offer new moms this discount. They offered them a discount to make sure that they were under diapers.com price. So diapers.com lowered their price. So Amazon lowered their price. Now, Amazon Web Services is the cash cow for Amazon retail. And all they need to do is borrow money from Amazon Web Services and continue the predatory pricing until they take a company like diapers.com out of business. And they did. And diapers.com eventually sold to Amazon. And what's critical about that sale is there's nobody left to sue. If diapers.com had just gone out of business and filed a lawsuit, right, the creditors would collect somehow. But because they were almost worthless and Amazon bought them, the entity to sue was gone. And so the predatory pricing in that case worked. Amazon does it all over the place, as do these other companies. A lot of these companies will buy a competitor and put it on a shelf because they don't want this competing product in the marketplace, and they don't even want to develop that competing product at that point in time. So they just put it on the shelf and make sure that there's no competitor in the market. So everything from the speech, the political thought, to the predatory practices of a true economic monopoly seem to exist with these major big tech companies. And so it leaves me to ask you this question, because, I think you and I are kind of free marketeers. Normally we'd say, well, let's just let the market's going to sort this thing out. And there are some economists who say, well, you know what? Monopolies are good for consumers. They reduce prices. But there are other economists that bring out primary, secondary, and tertiary impacts of a monopoly that are negative for consumers. But anyways, to get to the point, ultimately, tell me why we shouldn't just leave this alone for free markets. Is this not better for, other than the speech and the other problems with this? Is free markets the answer, or is there other answers? Well, Andy, I was absolutely on the free market side of this. And I went to a hearing in Boulder, Colorado. I was the only Republican to show up. It was 17 degrees out. I was not a happy camper. We call Boulder, Colorado, 28 square miles surrounded by reality. And I go to this hearing, and I hear from one company after another how Apple has taken them out. So if you're Spotify and you put your app on the App Store, because Apple has Apple Music, they charge you a 30% surcharge. 30% of every dollar you take in goes to Apple because you're competing with their product. It's that kind of discrimination that keeps competitors out of the marketplace because they have a dominant platform. And so I kept hearing all these stories. There was this company that it was a chip, I think, that you put on your purse or baggage, and if you lost it, you could use your app on your phone to find the baggage, and it did really well. And next thing, Apple develops their own product, and they discriminate by not sharing the new changes that they have in their software with this other company. And so it was just this constant discrimination against competitors because of a dominant platform. And so there is no free market. We believe in free markets when there's 10 airlines. We believe in free markets when there's 100 banks. There is no free market in this situation because there's one dominant retail e-commerce platform, Amazon. There's one dominant search engine, Google. And if you don't have a free market, you can't believe that market economics are going to solve these problems.
So what's the answer? I read Bork. I read what happened during the AT&T breakup. Went back and studied that. I'm just curious, what do we do now with what seems to be antitrust behavior by the part of these big tech monopolies? What action do we take? I mean, I agree with you. I don't think the market's going to be able to deal with this anymore, because, and a prime example for me is what was that? Everybody was going to a different platform, and then all of a sudden, Apple took them off. It was, in the speech platform. Parler, exactly. Parler was making real inroads, and we were an early adapter. I think you probably were too. And it was rocketing up. And then Apple kicked them off all of their servers and basically submarined them. I don't think.
Well, Apple took them off the App Store.
Right.
And then Amazon Web Services stopped being the host for their web site and just knocked them out completely. But the interesting thing about that, Andy, is a lot of people say, well, during January 6th, some people were using Parler. Well, some people were using Twitter and some people were using Facebook, but you didn't knock them off. You knocked the conservative site off. It was clear discrimination based on viewpoint.
Well, so how do we deal with it? Do we deal with it with an AT&T type of antitrust approach, where you separate them up into different companies? A lot of people, I mean, one of the things I always say is, if you hadn't broken up AT&T, we'd still all be on landlines, and you wouldn't have these cell phone developments. So the
1996 Telecommunications Act was huge, and it was huge. One of the reasons it was huge was because you could take your cell phone number and you could carry it with you to any cell phone company. So that portability gave you great flexibility for competition. And there's some answers like that here. One of the biggest ones, when you talk about breaking them up, I don't know that we should separate Instagram and Facebook or YouTube and Google. But Google controls digital advertising. They have over 90% of the buy side of digital advertising, over 90% of the sell side, and they bought the auction house. They bought DoubleClick that controls the auctions and it happens, in a split second, all these transactions occur. And so that dominance in the marketplace is dangerous, and it's costly, and it's what the Biden administration filed a lawsuit on a few days ago, and what Texas filed a lawsuit on 3 years ago is that dominance. In that case, Senator Lee in the Senate and I have a bill in the House that would force companies like Google and Facebook to decide if they want to be on the buy side or the sell side or the auction house. They can make that decision, but they can't be in all three. That would be an example of breaking them up. They have to get rid of 2/3 of whatever they decide they don't want to do.
And has that been reintroduced this Congress?
It will be soon.
Okay. What else? Any other suggestions for remedies?
Yeah, a lot of suggestions actually. There's bills that talk about the discrimination. I talked about what Amazon does and how they create their own product and then discriminate against the product, the third party seller product. They can't discriminate. If they create their own product, they've got to let the two products compete and let buyers see both of them because they have a dominant platform. The same with Apple. Apple can't punish apps because they compete with Apple apps. They've got to let these apps compete fairly on their platform. So the non-discrimination bill is I think, a bill that just makes a lot of sense and allows these competitors. People buy Spotify at $12 on the App Store rather than Apple Music at $9. That should tell you that Spotify is a better product than Apple Music. And there's no reason why people should be charged $3 more other than the fact that Apple charges 30% to Spotify.
So you
but
mean
then,
tell me
one I really want to get to, Andy, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I think one thing people have to understand is they can take this upon themselves, just like boycotts during the civil rights era. People can decide they don't want to use these products. You don't have to get overnight delivery. You can actually drive to the store and get your toilet paper, or order it and get it 2 days later. You can do the same thing with these other products. I use DuckDuckGo. I don't use Google. I use DuckDuckGo because they don't track me. On your phone, if you have Waze or you have Google Maps and you go someplace, turn it off. So they're not tracking you all over the place and sending you advertisements based on where you are located. You go to Florida or Arizona for vacation, and next thing you know, you get suntan oil, advertisements, and that's the kind of thing you're going to get because you left your tracking device on. And it would drive these companies crazy if people just started turning off some of these devices when they're not using them.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Well, Ken, I appreciate the work you've done, and I think if anybody wants more, I mean, I will just tell you, there's so much you talk about in your book, Crushed: Big Tech's War on Free Speech, that it kind of goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about today. A lot of research. Ken's a bright guy. Was a punter on the Princeton football team when he went to Princeton. So appreciate all you're doing, Ken, and good talking with you today. I wish we had more time. I wanted to talk to you about those 31 Abrams tanks that were sent to Ukraine, and no AUMF as we now have personnel and material on the ground in Ukraine. But anyway, we'll catch that next time. Everyone, thanks for joining us today. Ken Buck, Colorado's 4th Congressional District, doing a great job on this very important issue. It affects every American. Doesn't matter whether you're a D or an R or an independent or some other party. It affects you. I thank you, Ken. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Andy.